Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to a special breaking news segment. As news has come out that the final hours of the Bashar Al-Assad regime are being seen as rebel forces of all factions are rapidly advancing towards the nation's capital in Damascus, and government officials have fled over just the past few hours. Most of this information that we'll be showing y'all on this special breaking news report will largely be nearly live from the actual incidents that are happening on the ground, as most of these situations have only been developing, at least in these final hours, over the past 2 to 3 hours or so, as we are now seeing that it appears that the Syrian Arab Republic is quite truly going to most likely not last until the next few days. We were able to get major news today from around the area of Homs, a major city inside of Syria, and the third largest city inside of the entirety of the Syrian Arab Republic, that rebel forces had rapidly advanced towards the city's outskirts, already moving past Ar-Rastan, where the bridge had been knocked out yesterday, and have already advanced just a few miles north in the town of Talbese, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. We were able to see video and picture footage confirming that these rebels had arrived, which we can see right here in this clip. We can hear a large amount of celebratory gunfire as the convoy is now moving on its way towards the outskirts of Homs. The convoy has advanced practically unopposed from the southern outskirts of Hama just last night. Meanwhile, further south of the town and right on the outskirts of Homs itself, we've been able to see that the rebels are now preparing for their push into the city. We are assuming that the push is going to be one of the largest ones so far, and while the city of Aleppo may have been captured practically without a fight, the city of Homs appears to also be soon to be captured without a fight. Homs is an incredibly large city. It is just a little bit smaller than the city of Aleppo, which had around 2 million people living in it, and the city of Aleppo, interestingly enough, population-wise, is the exact same size as the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv. From what we are understanding, it seems as though the rebels are giving at least as much preparation as they are trained to, and it appears that the rebels and the Syrian Arab Army have practically no training, but nevertheless they are giving it their best to try and have at least some sort of a plan of how they're going to advance into the city and take it. And we were able to see in the clip right here the preparations that are being made for that advance that will begin most likely very soon. You can see the convoy now moving forward as others continue their preparation along the city's outskirts and its streets. That's seen in that clip right there, but once again showing the preparations of the rebels that have already made it to the outskirts of Homs. According to information that we have at the moment, there are rumors that the city has already been abandoned by the Syrian Arab Republic's Syrian Arab Army, as it does appear that according to reports from AFP, Syrian troops have already withdrawn from the key city of Homs following a rebel assault that was on the outskirts. We are unsure at the moment where the Syrian Arab Army is. They may be inside the city of Homs, or they may have already retreated well beyond. However, it seems as though the situation is very serious, and while the Russian Federation is firing off some of its final shots in anger, crazily enough, in the Syrian civil war, it appears that nothing can be done to stop the advance of rebel forces as they continue to topple and overthrow the Bashar Al-Assad regime, which has been embroiled in civil war for nearly 12 years. Here's footage of a Russian Ka-52 on the outskirts of Homs conducting an indirect rocket barrage on the incoming rebel forces. in a last-ditch, desperate attempt to at least try and slow the advance of the rebels. These efforts so far have proven unsuccessful, as the rebels have marched on their way from Idlib towards Hama and from Hama to Homs. Moving on from that clip, it does appear that the Russian Federation, even along the coastline, is starting to get an understanding that their time is nigh, and the final hours of the Bashar Al-Assad regime has come upon them, as well as the final hours of Russian military occupation and Russian military involvement in any area of the Syrian Arab Republic. Just south of the city of Latakia is the Latakia Military Airfield, also called the Bashar Al-Assad International Airport. This airport has been used a significant amount of times throughout the Syrian Civil War by the Russian Federation's armed forces, including especially the Air Force, as the Russian Air Force has used this base as pretty much a staging point for close air support operations inside of Syria on a tactical level to support the ground forces. From what we understand, the situation, strategically, is no longer tenable for the Russian Federation to hold the Bashar al-Assad International Airport, or as it's called in the world, the Latakia Air Base. For this reason, we've started to see that the remaining assets of the Russian Federation at the air base are being evacuated further south and towards the base at Tartus. Tartus is a naval base where some of these vehicles and equipment may be picked up by the Russian Navy and then transported back into the Russian Federation on the long voyage all the way around the entirety of Europe and into a North Sea base. From what we understand, these are some of the last videos we will ever see of Russian military vehicles inside of the Syrian Arab Republic. These are a S-300 and S-400 surface-to-air missile system that is already moving out of the Latakia area and the Latakia Air Base and moving towards the port of Tartus just 30 minutes ago. Once again showing the Russians are not doing that well, and at least according to Russian military bloggers, it appears that the end is nigh to them as well, as we have been able to get some interesting statements from those such as Kots News, which is a very prolific pro-Russian, I guess you could say military blogger, if you want to call him that, and here's exactly what they said today on the situation. The Russian embassy in Syria is giving a transparent hint. The Russian embassy in Syria reminds Russian citizens living in the Syrian Arab Republic of the possibility of leaving the country on commercial flights through operating airports. The situation in the country is heating up with each passing hour, and according to reports from the field, the militants have already reached the outskirts of Homs. If they take the city and make a dash to the border with Lebanon, the governance of Tartus and Latakia, where the Russian military bases are deployed, will be cut off from the rest of the country. Army and tactical aviation of the Russian aerospace forces are doing everything possible to slow down the militants' advance, but without support on the ground, this is unlikely to succeed. And the Syrian army is not yet showing any particular readiness to fight for its country. And then we can see that they actually included a phone number for the Russian embassy. It appears, however, that the Russian embassy may not be in operation for that much longer, as we are now hearing the Russians making statements that not only should they take commercial flights, but the Russian citizens inside Syria should immediately leave the country regardless of the circumstance and find any way out possible. That will be a lot more difficult, as Lebanon and Jordan have now completely closed off their borders to the Syrian Arab Republic and are not allowing anyone to exit the country at this time. Meanwhile, we are also starting to get reports that not only rebel forces still rapidly advancing towards the last major city outside Damascus that is under Syrian Arab Republic control under the Bashar Al-Assad regime, the city of Homs, it appears that now the Assad regime is losing some of the key cities and the major population centers south of Damascus. A death nail for the Syrian Arab Republic, which I'll be explaining in a moment. But nevertheless, we were able to see that the Druze people, who make up the large majority of the Syrian population living in the southern side of the country, south of Damascus, have begun to rise up in support of the rebel forces. We're unclear which rebel forces they are aligned with. Either it is the HFT, I believe it's called, or as we call it, the Syrian Salvation Government, or SSG forces, which is what their abbreviation is, or they're aligned with the Syrian Democratic Forces. At the moment, we're not exactly sure which rebel group they were actually associated with, but we were able to see that the rebels were taking the city of Sawaida and had already captured the police headquarters within the city, largely showing that all the civil administration buildings are under their control. Moving on from that clip and into our next one, we can then see that the Druze rebels are now tearing down portraits and pictures of Bashar al-Assad inside of the police office, which we can see right here. And that's the end of that clip right there, but once again showing the rebels are clearly in control of As-Suwaida at the moment. Meanwhile, other rebel outcrops have popped up in different areas, as we have been able to see a fairly large Druze uprising. We can see such places as Al-Suwaida, which at the moment was not liberated, has been liberated at this time, and it appears that wide-sweeping areas of the entirety of southern Syria, outside of the Golan Heights, which are currently under Israeli occupation, are now under the control of the Druze rebels. Once again, we're not exactly sure who the Druze rebels align with specifically, whether it is actually the SDF or the SSG, we're not entirely sure, but we will probably be seeing here in the moment that they will start to openly align with one side or the other. We are somewhat anticipating that it most likely will be SSG forces that they begin to align with. The writing is largely on the wall, and it is starting to show that the rebels have a large amount of momentum and a lot of morale for the large part to be able to continue their fight against the Syrian Arab Republic's government and finally bring an end to the Bashar al-Assad regime. But there are certainly a lot more things that are being heard out near the Euphrates River that are really showing us that things are not going well for the Syrian Arab Army, as major bombshell announcements have been made along the entire length of the bank of the Euphrates, a major defensive element for the Syrian Arab Army to be able to hold back the SDF, that every single one of their forces are currently in retreat at this moment through the desert and are racing to make their way towards the city of Damascus. From what we understand, the entire area is being abandoned by the Syrian Arab Army, and we were able to see one clip right here showing the Syrian Arab Army leaving the area of Deir ez-Zor just today. Meanwhile, outside the area, we have been able to see that the Syrian Democratic Forces are already advancing to fill in the power vacuum left by the Syrian Arab Republic at this moment, as we are seeing that advances have been prepared into such settlements as Al-Bukamal, which have been a subject of American airstrikes earlier on during the Israel-Hamas war, which began in 2023 as a larger part of the Iran-Israel proxy war that's been going on since the mid-80s. But we were able to see the column preparing its advance into Al-Bukamal just about an hour ago.
دير الزور من جسر الصالحية. هاي القوات العسكرية.
And we see them showing the convoy in its entire length as it makes this preparation to cross the Euphrates for the first time in years. The clip ends there, and as it ends, the convoy set forward and captured the town of Al-Bukamal, which is now, by official declaration, under the control of the Syrian Democratic Forces. This is according to all the information we've been getting at the moment, which is also corroborated by Reuters, a fairly credible source on reporting the situation on the ground, not only in Syria, but in many other places of the world. It even appears that the Syrian Free Army, which largely has been inactive at the moment, is now sensing blood in the water and is attempting to get military support from the Israelis to try and take control of the southern area of the country where the Druze rebels may be. Currently, the Syrian Free Army, or the Free Syrian Army, the FSA, is currently under the American protection at the At-Tanf garrison. But according to a direct statement from the Free Syrian Army commander, he stated that we are open to friendship with everyone in the region, including Israel. We have no enemies except the Assad regime, Hezbollah, and Iran. We hope that Israel will help us more. And it does appear that the Syrian Free Army is once again trying to show itself to be a very Western-aligned and pro-American and pro-Western interest force, considering it's largely been under the protection of the United States the entire time. It still seems, though, that every single faction in the conflict now, not just the SSG, not just the SDF, or the SFA, every single one of them at the same time is now sensing that the Syrian government is in a state of collapse and are racing at the moment to be able to take control of much of Syria as they possibly can. And it seems as though the Syrian government does know that time is up. We have now heard statements that prime ministers and other higher-up officials of the Syrian government is beginning to flee. We are starting to hear of defections within the Syrian government inside of Damascus, as it appears that anyone's trying to find a way out of Syria at this moment, including government officials that will most likely be held accountable for their crimes and atrocities committed under the Bashar Al-Assad regime. And meanwhile, one of the most damning pieces of news is that we finally have heard the whereabouts of Bashar al-Assad. We now understand that the picture that has been going on for the large part this entire time is that his family actually did leave on a Russian aircraft for the city of Moscow and has been in the Four Seasons Hotel pretty much since Aleppo has fallen. However, the information about Bashar al-Assad being inside of Moscow at that time appears to have been falsely reported by many, including some inside of the Russian Federation itself. Bashar al-Assad had actually remained in Damascus, Syria up until today. And we are now starting to hear that even the top dog of the Syrian Arab Republic itself is understanding that there is no more time for the Syrian Arab Republic to live, as we are now hearing that Bashar al-Assad is to leave Syria for the last time to flee to the Russian Federation. It is an absolutely amazing thing to think that the Syrian Arab Republic is finally collapsing. And I have to say that it is an absolutely wonderful thing to see that the Russian-aligned Syrian Arab Republic will finally fall. The implications are major, as the Russian Federation is quite truly finally leaving their bases at Latakia and Tartus for the final time. The Russian Federation will no longer be able to exert any form of at least physical influence over the area of the Middle East. No longer will the Islamic Republic of Iran be able to use the territory of Syria to continue to funnel and arms the forces of Hamas and Hezbollah against anti-Western and anti-American interests. The Russian Federation and the Islamic Republic of Iran's grip over the areas of the northern Middle East and the reign of terror that they've largely been inflicting among the local populace, and not only that, against Western-aligned countries in the region, is now going to be coming to a very swift end. It is a time that is one for the history books. A civil war that has lasted nearly 12 years, lost in a matter of 12 days after the offensive began by the SSG forces outside of Aleppo. At the moment, the Syrian government is quite literally fleeing, most like the cockroaches they've largely been over the entire conflict, and are now heading for any country that may be able to give them safe harbor, including the Russian Federation. Bashar al-Assad is leaving the country for the last time, and the Bashar al-Assad regime and the Assad family, for the large part, that has been in control of Syria for practically most of its history in the modern age, is finally coming to an end. The future of Syria, even though this sounds as though a very positive note, is still an uncertain one, and one that may be mired with future conflicts. However, we are largely hearing that the wish for more war may not be one that is too strong, as we are already hearing that the SDF is pledging that they will be conducting no fighting against HTS, or as we call them, Syrian Salvation Government forces, from what we're understanding, and it does appear that the country will finally be entering, at least from the statements that are being made right now, some sort of a time of peace. And we're already seeing that some people are already beginning to take advantage of the fall of the Assad regime, as some people who have been living as refugees, especially in cities like Idlib, since pretty much the very beginning of the Syrian civil war, are finally getting in their cars and returning home to their houses inside of the cities of Hama and Homs to once again try and return back to their lives as they were nearly 12 years ago at the beginning of the civil war.
Allahu Akbar. طاح الله أكبر تكبير الله أكبر الله حي الشباب الله ييسركم يلا الله ييسركم يا شباب ميسرة ميسرة ايه احمس 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 ميسرة يا شباب الله أكبر.
It is truly the end of an era. For an entire 12 years, once again to remind everyone, this nation has been embroiled in a civil war unlike any other. It has been propped up and supported by the Russian Federation for an entirety of 12 years. The Bashar Al-Assad regime, who has conducted untold tragedies and atrocities against the people, will finally be falling, most likely by the end of the next 2 to 3 days. It may even be quicker than that. It may actually be within the next day itself. But it nevertheless does appear that while that is going on, the Islamic Republic of Iran is starting to try and brew up a future problem in the region, possibly to support its interests outside of the Syrian Arab Republic collapsing and their ability to support Hezbollah and Hamas becoming a lot more difficult in the future. As we are now starting to hear that according to the IAEA, which is the International Atomic Energy Agency, that Iran has abandoned its short-lived pledge to stop enriching uranium close to levels needed for nuclear weapons production. This is once again showing us that the Islamic Republic of Iran very quickly has already backed out on their promise and is on the path to the creation of a weapon of mass destruction once again. Hopefully, Western nations who are not aligned to the Islamic Republic of Iran will see the danger in another nation becoming a nuclear power, especially a nation as uncertain and unstable as the Islamic Republic of Iran. And with that in mind, hopefully we will see that actions will be taken very swiftly to ensure that the Islamic Republic of Iran is not able to recover itself from such a major blow as the fall of the Assad regime and create some sort of a nuclear weapon, which will now make it a serious force to deal with inside of the Middle East. Meanwhile, the Russian Federation is not only losing grip over the Syrian Arab Republic, they're even losing grip over their puppet states inside of Georgia, as West Abkhazia recently underwent a coup of its own, where the president of the West Abkhazian region was overthrown by the people themselves, and an opposition party was installed. It appears that the Russian Federation is not happy with the opposition party, which is something that we really did not know for some time, as the Russians have really never made a direct comment on what happened in the coup. Nevertheless, their actions today with the sanctioning of West Abkhazia, which we'll make sure to tell y'all exactly what is being sanctioned at the moment, Moscow has launched a trade war against Abkhazia and has suspended all co-financing in Abkhazia, except for pensions, and Russia has also banned the import of tangerines, which is a major agricultural production of the Abkhazian region, into the Russian Federation. It appears that the Russian Federation is so strapped for manpower that they could not even attempt to send a small force into Abkhazia to ensure that the Russian-aligned party remains entirely in power at the time. They were not even able to ensure that. The best they can do is ban the importation of tangerines, really showing how far the Russians have fallen from being one who thought that the world was entirely in their grasp to the point that they're now fighting over the import of tangerines. It's showing that the Russian Federation, along with the Syrian government, is not long for this world, and most likely will not be able to last that much farther, at least in the Ukraine war with what's going on at the moment, and will not really be able to last that much longer in really any instance, including inside of their own domestic affairs. But nevertheless, that is all of the breaking news that we have in the special breaking news report today. I have to thank everyone so much once again for watching. I hope that y'all have enjoyed this short breaking news summary so far, and if y'all have, please make sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and if you want, support us on Patreon in the link in the description below. To give y'all a little bit of an aside, the reason why we're not as hyper and excited today, or at least I am in the news coverage, is that this is truly the end of an era that we are seeing right now with the Syrian Civil War. Practically my entire life, well, about half of my life that I've been alive, this Syrian Civil War has been ongoing. For many of y'all who do not know, I was actually around 10 years old when the Syrian Civil War began, and now at 22 years old, this war that has been broiling in the background the entire time that I've pretty much been alive, it's finally coming to an end. It's a pretty wild thing to see, and once again, there's a lot of questions about what the future may bring inside the Syrian Arab Republic, whether it'll be a good thing or not. But it is still wild to think that now that I have gotten to the point that I can cover news on a news channel, we are seeing the end of the Syrian Civil War as it has existed for 12 years. Government forces are falling, and the rebel forces are now going to be the ones who dictate the future of what the Syrian Arab Republic will look like. It is a really wild thing to think about. It's actually incredibly surreal, but nevertheless, it's the first time that we've seen an actual direct defeat against the Russian Federation and its control outside of its own borders. And hopefully that'll be echoed not only in Syria, but in Georgia and Ukraine as well. But still, a big thanks so much once again to everyone for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.